Hello, everyone, agents, and welcome back to the show. This is Katlyn Eggar, your host, bringing you the Age of Independence, an opportunity for our agencies to evolve from the inside out. So the past couple weeks, we've really been tackling end of year topics. The holidays are upon us, and this is just such a great time to think about our businesses and reflect and start thinking about what we want to build in 2021. So I invited a really special guest to join us on the podcast today. Hi, Mallory. How are you?
Hi. Great, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I have been so excited to have Mallory on the show with you guys. Mallory Leonard is an executive business consultant with ExecHQ. She's based out of Knoxville, Tennessee, but she has clients all over. And I go way back with Mallory. We actually have a lot in common. So, Mallory, tell us just a little bit about yourself, and we'll help the listeners get to know you if this is their first time hearing from Mallory Leonard.
Perfect, thank you. So I just relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, so I don't quite have a Southern accent yet.
So tell us
But
where you relocated from, because that's
I
the
was I was in San Diego for 10 years, and I owned an Allstate agency, like someone else I know there. And I sold that agency in 2019, and then we relocated here in October of 2020, so last month.
Woo,
And now
Tennessee. It was
yeah,
a bit of a culture shock coming from San Diego.
I went from a city of like, or a county of like 5 million people to a city of like 500,000. So I went to the mall the other day and I'm like, this is not San Diego anymore. I'm settling in. It's colder than I'm used to, but I'm enjoying it. And now I'm just helping businesses be awesome at what they do, which is what I love because I've owned a business too. So I know how to make companies function and run with their culture. So that's what I'm doing now.
And that's what I love about our background starting in the captive insurance world as agency owners, because you do wear so many hats that you learn so much about business ownership and skills that are really transferable to a lot of things, whether it's recruiting, team building, marketing, the things that you learn about finance, operations. And so now you're taking those lessons from the past and really helping to plug them into other businesses in different markets. So what are some of the niche business types that you're working with right now?
So obviously I'll work with an insurance agency. I mean, I know the ins and outs of it. What I've learned is I'm really good at service-based businesses. So where you have a client interaction, that's kind of my jam. So law firms, financial agencies, accounting firms, anything where there's a service-based transaction, that's where I'm really pretty good at it. I've always kind of done well with client interactions, being at one of the top customer service agencies for Allstate back in the day. So we really developed around that kind of business. And I mean, I've got some funky stuff too I worked with a trucking company, like, but we can pretty much do anything. Where I don't really touch is like medical based or anything where there's my brain doesn't work that way. So
We'll
yeah,
let other people handle that.
yeah.
Deal with it. So yeah, I've always said that I don't know that pharmaceuticals or even selling health insurance is for me. Let's be real.
No.
I have so much respect to the agents listening that tackle that kind of
Mhm.
intricate stuff. So that is so cool, Mallory. So take us back to your Allstate days just a little bit. Tell us about your agency and just some of the things that were important to you, because I feel like you're looking from the outside in, like your personality was so bright in your agency and your team culture was so fun and upbeat, and it seemed like a really great place to work.
Yeah, I think what we started to do is I started to go against the grain on what I thought that people think that we should be doing as insurance agency owners, right? And I mean, I started back in the day as a sales producer for an agency, and I actually grew a book of business on a broker side too, in that time too. So I've been an employee, and I'll tell you, when I was like 22 and I just moved to San Diego, I was working for not an Allstate agency, but an agency, and it had a bad culture. And I actually like swore off insurance. I was like, I'm never going to work in insurance again. But I was young and naive and didn't realize that it wasn't insurance that I didn't like. It was the culture and the breakdown of the office. And I always said I would never let my employees feel the way I felt in that organization ever again. Because thankfully I had an agent who was really great and brought me on. That was an Allstate agent when I was about 23, and he had a great culture. And I was like, okay, I know it wasn't the product or the industry that I hated. I just hated that office because it was bad. And that's been a big deal for me. Like, I always tell agency owners, when you're hiring, if you have someone coming from a different office, a lot of times they'll like say, oh, I won't hire them. I'm like, you have no idea how crappy their situation was with that agency. Not all agency owners are created equal. So talk to them, see what's going on. They may just have a bad culture problem in their office. And so we did fun things. Like we would let them off, if they needed time off. I wasn't the one that treated our office like a retail office. If they needed a Friday off, I'd be like, all right, well, let's figure it out. And I think a lot of times what happens in your agency is if you treat it like a retail location, you're going to get retail employees. So I treated them like professionals. And I think that was a big difference for me, and instead of just treating them like a butt in a seat, I guess.
Right.
A lot, right?
So, talk to us about bad culture. What are some red flags that we want to, keep our eyes open for so that we can make sure that that's not creeping into our agencies unawares?
I think there's a couple things, right? So when I was managing an agency, when I first started managing a big agency and I was in charge of the whole thing, we were actually in a car dealership. So I was in charge. I mean, I was like the COO of the agency. I didn't have the right staff. And here's what happened. And I will be the first to admit this. And I've been listening to John Maxwell, and he had the same situation happen to him where he was like, I was a crappy leader my first job. I was too, because I was really good at sales, and my boss they had hired me because I was good at sales. I was a terrible leader. And it caused a problem in our culture, right? Because I had people that were stronger, more like maybe even a little older than me, that started to change the operation. And what was happening was it was just not good, right? And so anytime I would try to come out and say, hey, these are the processes we're going to do, this is what I expect, no one took me seriously because we had a breakdown in our culture. And I had a great top producer who was causing problems in our operation. And what I really learned is I'd rather have no one in my operation than bad employees, right? And so sometimes you just have to start over. And you have to be careful too when you're hiring and you're promoting a leader in your company to run an agency or to be a manager in your operation, whatever it is, that you're not hiring someone that's good at sales and then just letting them run out and do whatever they want. They have no idea how to lead a team, right? So you have to make sure that you're putting people that have leadership skills in the right position. And if they don't, cultivating that person into a good leader and helping them. I had little help. So unfortunately, I had a lot of people that I learned from, because I had to kind of learn the hard way on how to be a better leader.
And I think there's so much talk right now about finding what you're passionate about, finding your niche and chasing that thing, because ultimately that's what's going to be so rewarding for you in the long haul. But one of the things I really just like to stress from my perspective is that sometimes the ramp up time to get to that period is so worth it. So if you have to find yourself in the pilot seat, even if you have to find yourself selling for a period of time while you're working on growing your startup, or if you have to make changes to your team culture and you feel like you're having to start afresh or wear more hats right now than what you want to. Yes, the goal is to be able to automate and delegate so many of those things. But when you look at someone who's already there, they're already at the stage where they get to really be picky, choosy on what they spend their time on. That we're all going to get there. Keep your sights on that goal, but don't be discouraged if you're not there yet today, because rolling up your sleeves today is going to pay off, and you will eventually get to the point where you get to really be just invested in the things that really spark your passion and the things that you really enjoy doing as an agency owner. So that's just my little spiel for you'll get there, but it's okay if we have to put in that hard work for a period of time to ramp up to that point, as long as we're being strategic about it and we're seeing those positive changes as we go along.
And I think sharing with your employees what your goal for your operation is. You can't create warriors in your business that want to like go to war for your company every single day if they have no idea what they're fighting for. So if they go in there and they're thinking, oh, I'm just a salesperson in an agency and this is all I'm ever going to be, someone like me, I wouldn't, that's why I left being a salesperson in an agency, because I had no sight on the future, right? But if you can say, hey, this is my goal. We want to own 3 locations, or we want to do XYZ with our operation. And here's the things that you can do to help me get there and the growth path for you, then you're going to create warriors in your business. And it's going to help you tremendously get to that point to where you can start working in your business and start working on it. And that's some of the things I do is I'll sit down and, set up strategic goals with you, sit down with your employees and help them understand what your operation wants to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And I think that's sometimes where you kind of lose that breakdown in staff, because they just don't feel like they have anything to fight for when they're there,
So how do we build warriors that'll go to bat for our business? How do we do that?
I think really giving them the understanding of what they are there for, right? So they're not just there to sell insurance. They're not just there to service your policies. They're there to, they need to see these growth paths, and they need to own it just as much as you do. And if that's, figuring out what they want, is it more pay? Is it promotions? Is it being able to own their own agency one day? I worked for an agent who, when I told him at 22, I wanted to own an on-state agency, he didn't discourage me from that. And guess what? I bought one at 27, and that was pretty cool, So just making sure you know exactly what they want within your operation, because if they have some ownership, right, and they are accountable to you growing too, then they're going to want to do it for you. People inherently want to help people,
Yes.
right? But they're selfish. We want something out of it too. So if you can develop that together, then you'll create a great operation, and you won't have turnover in your office if you do that.
I love that inspiration. So, man, just picturing, you may already have that team of warriors behind you, and that's just such a great place to be. You want to like protect that team culture. And I think that's one of the things about preventing bad culture from happening is like protecting your top performers and making sure that they have that environment where they can continue to grow and thrive. And then if you're working on building that atmosphere this year, I think there's definitely some challenges that COVID has thrown into that. We may have more people working remotely. So can you talk to us a little bit about like how agency owners can go into 2020 with these big goals when there's so many unknowns out there, and just some things they can do to build team culture, even if they have people working remotely right now?
So I think what you need to do, and I can help create this too, is it's almost like when you're doing an employee review, right? You have these expectations, and we do things a little differently, where we'll say, I want them to kind of review me too, right? Like what do they expect, right? So you need to set these expectations of what, like, if you're going to value their time while they're at home, what are these like data points that they need to hit, or like what like action items, like what do you expect from them on a daily basis? Because we can sit down and say, hey, this person's not doing enough to warrant this, this pay or whatever. We can say, what are the expectations? And I think that's the big key, is written expectations on what you want from them on a production level or on a productivity level, right? Because if there's not these, and just letting them know that, hey, this is what we expect, and then inspect it, right? And say every, if it's daily, weekly, or whatever. And then if they're not hitting these goals or these for production or productivity that you've hit for them, as figuring out why there's obstacles. I think sometimes what happens is when an employee starts to do bad, we like slap them on the wrist, right? Why are you doing bad? Well, we don't really find out why they're doing bad. Why are they not hitting these productivity or production requirements, right? We just get on to them for not doing it. So we need to, when you have that happen, sit down and evaluate, okay, what's going on? What can we fix? What do you hate? What do you like? What can we make better? And just helping them to get to those goals. And then the other thing too, and this is something that we don't like to admit as business owners, is a lot of times what's happening in your organization, and I've heard this from employees who wouldn't say this to their boss, is you create these processes and they're behind the scenes going like, why do they do this? Like, what the heck? Why are we even doing this? This makes absolutely no sense, because they're in the operation more than we are, right? And then they're too afraid to say it. So, encouraging that conversation. Hey, if we're doing something and it's ridiculous to you, ask why we're doing it. And maybe I have no idea. It's just something we've always done, you know?
It makes
And
it so much easier if you can create that environment where people feel confident and comfortable speaking up, because then you can just work through it together. And that's
yeah.
so much easier than rolling out a new process and then no one's doing it. And then you're
Yeah.
trying to think, why aren't you guys doing it? And then it gets super awkward and
And you're getting more gray hair because no one's
just
doing it.
frustrated. So getting that buy-in before you move to the follow-up part of the accountability stage. So working on it together, having the conversations, doing the training, and then before you follow up, making sure you're getting buy-in and crossing that bridge so that then you can move into the stage where you're inspecting what you expect and having the conversations about how things are going and closing that continuous feedback loop. So
Yep.
we're coming to the end of the year, and I think it's a good time to be thinking about employee reviews. And so there may be some agencies listening who have thought about doing agency reviews in the past, but
Mhm.
may not have started a process, a consistent process for it yet, because I feel like there's a couple hurdles that can be a bit daunting if you're rolling this out for the very first time in your agency. So if we could talk for a couple minutes to the agency who may not have that consistent employee performance review process already rolling in your agency in like a really effective way. We're coming to the end of the year, so now could be a really good time to tackle that hurdle and to figure out something that works for your agency. We have 2021 right upon us, and you're thinking about your goals for the agency, and your team is probably thinking about their goals, both personally and professionally. So it's a great time to rip that Band-Aid and dive right in and figure out a system that works. So starting from the top down, Mallory, what are some things that an agency could call their employee review process if they wanted to pick a name for it that's not super intimidating or has like a negative connotation? Because I think when employees hear review time, that they feel like that maybe there's a subconscious connotation with that they might feel like they're being scored or judged in a negative way, and that it's something that they wouldn't look forward to.
I think, it's just, I've never thought about changing the name of it, but I think just framing it in a positive light, right? So you could say, we're going to sit down, and you can set it however you want. It can be monthly, quarterly, annually, but you need to calendar it, and it needs to go on the calendar with them, because if you don't, it's just like something else you're going to forget to do. Oh, we'll get around to it. We'll get around to it, but it needs to be done. So you could say, we're going to sit down monthly, quarterly, whatever it is, and we're gonna see like what we can do better together, and what you're doing, like what you're being really badass at, like how you kicking butt in the agency, right? And put it in a positive light, so all right, sit down with them and say, how can we work together? What am I doing that would make me a better leader for you? And coming at it from a positive place, from, hey, we're here to grow and to be the best we can be, but we need to do it together. So framing it that way versus like, okay, you're supposed to sell 45 items and you only sold 42 and we need to figure out why. Like, no one wants to sit there and hear that, right? And then if we're going, okay, they're going to come to you when you're doing this review and say, okay, I know I was supposed to sell 45 items, but I didn't, right? It's coming from them. They're going to feel like you're doing it together. And I think that's really the most important part of it, is if you come at it to them where you're saying, this is what you needed to do better, this is what I expect from you, they're just going to shut down, and they're not going to feel like they're contributing, right? But if you come at it to say, hey, your part in this, being a warrior in my office and being a part of my agency, is to do XYZ. How can I help you do that? How much can I make you better? Then you're going to collaborate more. So it's less of a review, I guess, and more of a, hey, how can we collaborate together? And then coming to when you are having a great, sorry, my dog barked. So, when you do have a good collaboration, giving lots of praise, and then really finding out what they want that makes them like love being in your office, right? And like, just they like time off, setting goals around, hey, we used to do this in my office all the time. If you hit a weekly or a daily goal of however many ever items, right? Because I like to break things weekly, not monthly, because it's just easier. And then for every item you sell over your goal, on Friday, you get 30 minutes, you get to leave early that day, or you can bank the time. Some people love that, right? Some people don't. I couldn't care less about time off. I want all the money. Give me more money. Figuring out what that was. So then you can check in with them too on that review and saying, hey, we built this cool promotion around you and what you want to do, and you've hit it this much. Like, that's awesome. Or what's keeping you from doing it? And I think making it more tailored around what they need really helps them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think we can't skip we have to slow down and think about how it's being received and how we're framing the conversation. So
Mhm.
instead of thinking of this as a report card session, which
Mhm.
is what it used to be in the past, what if we thought of this as a coaching and mentoring session where we're sitting down and we're trying to give professional guidance to somebody in our life that we really care about? And we want to have a two-way conversation and we want to learn and have takeaways from it as well. All of a sudden, it becomes an opportunity for us to think about how much value can I bring to this conversation? Can
Mhm.
I completely turn upside down what this employee is expecting out of this review conversation? And can I turn it into a meeting where they walked away with takeaways? They maybe wanted to take notes we learned together. And
Mhm.
I'm just like when we get on the phone with a client and we're trying to sell them insurance and we're trying to bring as much value to that person to create a wow moment as possible. What if we brought that mindset to our employee review sessions and really didn't just take it for granted that they were going to automatically buy into whatever it was that we told them the plan is or the goal is, and decided to try to make it easier for them to meet their personal and professional goals and give them as much input as possible so that they're walking out of there inspired with action steps and they feel like you're in their corner and that you guys are working together to get the agency to the place that it needs to be. And they know how that ties into their personal goals. I feel like it takes the awkwardness out of it and makes it so much more rewarding for you and for your team members that you care so much about.
Well, and you can even come up with it where as their mentor, as their boss too, I can say, hey, what do you want? Like, what do you expect? What do you see out of this out of the agency? What's a process that we can change or we can create together? And then that's my action item as their leader. Like, hey, you came up with this. I'm going to implement it because it's your idea. So now I have something that I'm taking from you. And then that's something you can bring up on their review too. Hey, you had this idea of doing XYZ in the office. I created a process and implemented it because that's my job. And this is how it's doing. Great job. Like, you can really take away from them. And if you're really nervous about it, I can sit in like as a consultant with you on these reviews, and it makes it a little less, like
Helps get
yeah.
the ball rolling.
Yeah, and it's more of like, hey, this great collaboration and meeting of minds versus, oh my gosh, I gotta do this to do it. It's more of an HR process. No one wants to do it.
Exactly.
And the other thing too that it really does help with, and is if you do have a disciplinary situation, which you will have. I mean, it's not always going to be like honky dory. Is they're so used to having a conversation with you at this point that when you do have to have a conversation that's not good, it makes it a little easier because they're used to you having that relationship and that ability to communicate with each other. Where if all of a sudden you've not been doing these reviews and they do something where they have a disciplinary problem, they're going to freak out because you've never had a conversation with them, and you're going to freak out too because you're going to be like, oh, I don't like getting on to people, like it really does help with that aspect of it too.
Just creating that culture of continuous feedback. So it's part of what you do in the office and part of
That
setting.
accountability, yeah, yeah.
So with what you mentioned, like the 40 to 45 items thing. So how many items should a producer be producing? And I think that this is one of the challenges and one of the things that holds agency owners back from setting a consistent process in place is because in our world, in the independent world, there's so much opportunity. You could sell $200,000 a month. You could sell $100,000 a month. You could sell $50,000 a month. And all of those numbers are incredible numbers, right? So it's like, how do you pick one and stick with it? Because there's just so much it's such a broad spectrum of where a producer could land and still be considered a solid producer that is contributing and generating revenue for your agency. So how can an agency owner begin setting benchmarks if they haven't like kind of like drawn a line in the sand yet, because they're not sure if it should be $25,000 or 30 or 35 or 40 or 80, and they're not sure where to go.
I've always loved premium based goals myself, so I get it. I think what you need to look at is their like ability to sell, right? You're gonna have people that get in there and then like they can't sell, and they're just not built that way. And you need to be able to recognize if that person's in the right role, right? But beyond that, if you've got someone and they're working and you can keep pushing them like little by little. I mean, if you've got someone that comes in, I wouldn't give them this huge grandiose goal that they're not going to ever accomplish, right? So if they're selling, I don't know, 15, 20,000 in premium and it's consistent, then just saying, okay, what are you doing on a daily basis? What's your productivity look like? If we could increase that by 10%, can we increase your goal? And then once they hit that consistently, then push them again. But you can't say, okay, you're selling 15, I expect you to sell 35 now, right? It's just not going to happen. They're going to feel really uncomfortable. And then the one thing you can do that's really helpful, and I have a really cool, I use this in the agency, it's like almost like a goal sheet I can send you guys, is it breaks it down per week. So then it's like, okay, if your goal is 7,000 premium a week. Well, if let's say I only get 5,000 on week 1 of the month, right? Well, all I have to do now is make up 2,000 over the course of 3 weeks. That seems a lot easier than getting behind at the end of the month and saying, oh, I'm 30% down from my goal. So breaking it down that way. And then I would sit down with them on a Friday and be like, I like Friday meetings. I hate Monday meetings. And I would say, hey, you've got 5,000 in premium this month or this week. If you want to hit your monthly goal, we just need to do next week, we need to do 7,400 3 more times or whatever it is, instead of just at the end of the month and being like, crap, I didn't hit it. You know what I mean? So that's what you can break it down, and it seems more tangible. So then when you want to increase their goal a little bit, saying, okay, your goal is 7,000 a week. I don't know where I got that. Maybe it's 1,000 a day. I don't know. Now we're going to try 8,000 a week. That seems a little easier, right? Than just these big goals at the end of the month. And I think that helps you really figure out what it is. But you have to really know what their aptitude is. Like if you can't you can't expect your best producer to be your best. Oh wait, let me back up. You can't expect your like middle producers to be your best producer. There's always going to be someone in the middle ground, and you can push them to get there, but they may not be. You know what I mean? Like not everyone's going to sell 40,000 a month in premium. So, but I'd rather have 2 producers that did average than 1 really high end producer, because if I lose them, I'm screwed. Right.
And what I've seen sometimes, occasionally with the really high end producers, is that you can see really big spikes and then they'll have a dip. And then the consistency is really a great goal to push towards with anyone. And one thing that's worked really well for me is if you're tracking and measuring the data in your agency and you know what that person's close ratio is, if you know what your average premium per household is in your area, and you know about how many dials they would have to make to get a quote, you can actually back out of their sales premium goal and give them a behavior based goal of how many dials and quotes that they need today. How many conversations do you need to have? How many policies do you need to review live with a customer in any given day to get a sale that day or 2 sales that day based on whatever their premium goal is? And when you can like walk them through those numbers and then teach them how to calculate it themselves, if they find themselves out maybe 10 days to the end of the month, then they can calculate, okay, I have to get this many quotes in to hit the 12,000 that I need by the end of the month. And it helps them feel more in control of their situation. I think one of the biggest mindset shifts that we want to guide our team through is that sales don't happen to you. You don't just like show up and get lucky one day. You don't just like place outbound calls and get lucky because a nice person that's friendly and like talkative picks up the phone. Sales are something you create. Relationships are something that you build. And every time you get on the phone with anybody that is on the other line, that's a huge opportunity for you to create something great. And when we help our sales team wrap their arms around having that internal locus of control, it makes these goals take on a different shape for them mentally, because we know that this is a mental game, and if we can just get them in the right mindset, it really helps them tackle these things that we're putting in front of them.
And if you want to reward good behavior, we did this in my office too, it made me think of it was, so let's say that you have 3 productivities that they should do, right? If it's, they need to quote this many households, they need to make this many outbound calls or talk time, whatever it is. And, or they can sell so many items that day. And so what I would do is if they hit if they sold an item or sold, I think it was 2 items, or they did their productivity, they got a check mark for that day. And if by the end of the month, they had a check mark on every day, I think I gave them like 1 day they could miss, then they got a prize. And so that prize was whatever they wanted. So usually it was a half day off on Friday that they could use whenever they want, or $100 gift card. Cause that to me was about the same
That's
amount.
huge. Yeah. I mean, that's super.
And I had a girl that never missed it. She wanted her $100 gift card, and I wouldn't let them do a Visa card. I made them do like Target or like for me Sephora or something, so that way they had to use it on themselves, right? It wasn't like they could just go buy groceries with it. I'm like, no, you need to reward yourself, or if it's time off, and that way they held accountable to their hustle almost, and it made it more fun. I would be like, how are you doing today? Are you hitting your productivity goal? If not, did you get your production goal? Right. And so it was just a fun way, and it cost me like absolutely nothing to do. So.
And I love that idea because it keeps it fun, and it rewards, finding ways to reward the wins along the way is huge, because there's a difference between their like minimum production goal and the stretch goals that you're both working on together. So maybe their stretch goal is that they are going to produce $83,333 every month because they want to be $1 million producer in a year, right? Yeah. That's great. But if they sold 60,000 this month, that does not mean they were a failure.
Awesome.
Yeah. So celebrating the wins along the way is huge, and making sure that we're not just every time they hit a goal, just raising the bar, hit the goal, raise the bar, hit the goal, raise the bar, because that can be really de-incentivizing. So I definitely think there's a balance there between working together to achieve a stretch goal that's going to take a while to build, and celebrating really great things that they're already doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally.
Yeah. And as far as like how often to have the reviews, you mentioned there's really just a lot of flexibility there for agency owners to really think about what works for them, whether it's annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly. So tell me a couple instances where maybe you would go to having these conversations on a regular basis, or weekly, or more often, as opposed to every couple months.
I love a Friday meeting, right? No one wants a Monday. So celebrate the week and then plan ahead for the next, and do it at their desk, not at yours, right? Because you're in their territory. Then you're on their turf. You're giving them your undivided attention. You don't have your Outlook popping up at you while they're sitting across your desk like a client, or like we had a conference table, and we would sit at the conference table a lot because it was just nicer. So that would be like a little meeting that you could have to set these weekly goals, so that way you can get ahead of it if you have a bad week, right? And then I would say quarterly is good. And your quarterly is going to be a little different, because it just depends on what your annual goal is. But like, let's say you are in a captive position where you really need to have your year ironed out by October 15th. You might want to make sure that your year end is on October 15th or November 1st, right? So you might not do it like on a traditional quarterly basis, because if you did it like January, would be April, then you'll end the year out when the year's ending, and that's too late, right? Because you need to make sure you're setting it up to actually end the year well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That would be a great time to do a quarterly goals. If you're a captive agency and you have those December 31st items you're going to have to issue, and those life policies that have to squeak it through in time, and making sure that everybody's set for that like fourth quarter, it's time, it's hustle time. And when it comes to those regular weekly touch bases, I really love having those in place for new team members that are onboarding into your agency, because it's such an important culture building time when someone new has just joined your agency. And it's a really it's a time to work with them really closely to figure out if the potential that you saw is something that they're going to be able to step into in your environment, if it's a good fit or not. And so having weekly conversations about whether they're on pace or off pace and celebrating what they've been doing well. What did we learn this week that we're going to carry into next week? Maybe week 1, they cranked out a couple quotes, but they didn't do a bundle presentation yet. Then maybe setting that for the next week if we're really just breaking it down for a brand new team member. But having those weekly conversations with someone that's new, I think helps you identify if they're going to work out in your agency. It helps you figure it out sooner rather than later. But then if it is somebody that's a great fit, you're really going out of your way to cement really good habits and strengthen that relationship with them from day one.
And I would say this too, especially when you're in a smaller organization. Okay, so I want everyone to know when you're interviewing an employee, that is the most uncomfortable thing you will ever do. Nobody likes it. If you're interviewing for an agency, just know that they're as nervous as you are. Like no one likes it. It's uncomfortable. It's not natural, right? I can have a conversation with you because I know you, but if it's some stranger, it's like almost like pulling teeth. It's like worse than a first date, you know? But I will say one thing that you can do is bring your, not your favorite employee in there with you, but bring your employee who sees your vision, right, in the interview with you. And I've had this. I had one of my employees, we interviewed this guy and I loved him. I was like, oh, he's awesome. And she's like, no. And I didn't hire him because she's like, just something isn't right. And your employees want the same culture that you are building, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a great way that you can do. And then if you've got the right organization, if you have the right employee, they can be on these little weekly meetings with you. You can do it as a team, and you almost create a mentorship between your employees too, right? Versus just me being in charge all the time. And that helps when I need to step away, knowing that, hey, if something goes on or I need help, they have built this great relationship with their coworker that they can, rely on too. And they all have these goals and these aspirations together. So that's helpful.
Absolutely. So let's help the people tuning into the podcast, agency owners in the captive world, the independent world. Whether you are with a captive agency or you have stepped over to the independent side, we have all been through some COVID craziness this year, and it definitely threw some curveballs. I think we've learned so much, and I just want to kind of make some guesses about like, how could we best help agency owners who are thinking about everything that we just talked about, but in the light of COVID? Maybe they're like, well, that sounds great, but half of my team is in the office, the other half is working from home, and they're homeschooling their kids at the same time. What if an agency owner feels guilty putting goals in place and setting standards and setting expectations for production right now because they feel like there's been upheaval? I feel like it's definitely a valid concern. So how do we work through that together?
So you got to be careful not to let it be an excuse, right? And it can be. I think the biggest thing to remember is that our human nature is we thrive on structure, right? We thrive on process and accountability. So this is your time to give them that structure and that process and that accountability that they're not getting anywhere in their life right now. They don't have it with their kids' school. They don't have it with, how their lives are just changed. Say, look, I know things are crazy. I'm going to give you this accountability and the structure that I know you're probably really wanting. Because I think people don't like the day is, I have to go worry about my kids and do all this stuff. That's fine. But if you can give them that structure, I think they're going to want it. Do you know what I mean? And then just giving them the option to come into the office to do, like, even if it's just once a week or whatever it is, you working around like what they want. Like for me, I don't like working from home. I like being in a client's office, but some people do. And if you can give them the option on what they want, that'll help. But I promise you, they want that structure. They're missing it.
I bet they're craving some predictability right now. And so you might be doing them a favor, agents, when you roll out these review sessions, report cards, goal setting meetings, what have you. So,
and just ask them and find out what they want, right? I think the biggest mistake that we make as, leaders is that we assume that we know what's best for everyone, and we don't. And no one thinks like me, right? I think like me, but you don't think like me. So I need to figure out, if you're my employee, how you think and what you want, and how can I create a better work environment around what you want specifically. And I won't know what that is unless I'm asking you. And that's why it's great to have these meetings, and they don't have to be all about a review. It can be like, how was your week? Like, let me know what's going on in your life. So when you come in and I can tell that you're not your best, I have the authority and the permission, because we've built that relationship to figure out what's wrong to make your day better. But if I don't have that rapport with you, then I don't have the authority or the permission to do that. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. That's so cool. And man, if I were starting in insurance for the first time, I would want to have worked in Mallory's agency. So I was actually working retail sales before I was in insurance. And I remember I had forgotten about this for the longest time. But I remember that there was a time that a client came into the store and they recruited me. They tried to recruit me. They handed me a business card for like a nationwide agency. It was in North Carolina at the time. And I was probably about 22 years old. And I almost had forgotten. I don't even know if this had really been her memory, because I was just like, oh, insurance, and just like put it off to the side. But I'm so, so glad that I didn't start in insurance in the wrong kind of agency environment or with the bad culture, because every insurance agency is different. And we have the opportunity to create a really cool place for people to build their careers, where this producer that we're working with right now, where we're just trying to get them to 40 items, 50 items a month, could be a future agency owner and experience the wins and the things that we went through in that experience. And so it's so worth it having a chance to take those cool things that happen to us and be able to multiply it for someone else in their life and see it happen for them. So
And you can see when the culture really is good. So my first office that I worked at was in Florida, and it was a State Farm agent. And he has a wall, he calls it like a wall of success, right? So he's had 4 employees become agency owners. 2 became State Farm agency owners, 1 became a Goosehead, and 1 became an Allstate, which is me. I wouldn't believe but how cool is that he's able to celebrate that he helped create these business owners and these leaders, because it was developed out of a great culture. And I think, I said when I went to when I moved to San Diego and I wasn't in a good office, I mean, it really almost turned me away from insurance completely. And where would my life be now, And I think thankfully my first job was in a great culture, and it really helped me overcome, maybe, okay, I was just in a bad spot, that's such a cool testament to see your employees go and be successful. I mean, one of my best producers and previous employees is running an independent agency right now, and I couldn't be more proud of her, right? It's cool to know that, hey, you had a hand in that. And I actually have another employee who just started his own health insurance agency, and he's doing really well in LA. And it's cool to know that you helped that foundation. And like, I was never upset when an employee left, because I was like, if you're leaving and we have a good reason, like if we're good, it's just you're going to grow. All the ones that left are like, that's where they are. They're like doing these great things in their career, and you've had a hand in that. And how cool is that?
that says so much. So yes, employee reviews are easier said than done. It takes time. You're tracking your data, you're measuring, you're setting goals, you're preparing the forms, you're taking time on your calendar to schedule this with your team, but it's so worth it. And it really helps you to really just build something even greater within your agency. So I hope that this holiday episode was a winner for you guys. Thanks for listening. So Mallory, how can our agents find you?
Yeah, the best. I mean, I'm always on LinkedIn. So it's Mallory Leonard is my name. And you can email me at mallory.lee@exechq.com, or find me at exechhq.com. My name's not very common, so it should be easy to find me. But yeah, that's a couple ways. And I always do a free consult. So if anyone wants to just sit down and see if there's a need for me, I can help them. And we work project based, so it's not like you're in a big contract, and then sometimes it's good just to get some outside perspective. So I'm definitely that. Yeah. I'll teach
Especially
you how to work on your business instead of in it.
yes, so that we can get to that goal that we have where we get to spend our time on the things that really get us excited every day. So, agents, this series is about you and the wave of opportunity that is in front of us to shape our agencies and mold them into something great that not only makes our dreams come true within the agency, but also for our team members. So, Mallory, thank you for walking us through end of year goal setting and what it means for our teams. And agents, this is Katlyn Eggar and Mallory Leonard signing off until next time.